Um, so if this is your first time, I'll give you a quick overview of what, Grow Your Brain is all about. So we basically bring some, kick-ass individuals to talk about what they're doing outside of, they're typically non-strategists. Sometimes they are, but most likely they're not. And, kind of bringing that raw material to the strategist brain, and how do we kind of learn new things? And they typically fall in between, four different categories roughly. One is insights. It could be, let's say, an interesting trend report that's kind of floating around in our world. We'll bring the authors to take us through it. It could be something related to culture. We know that, a lot of the work that we do as strategists is tapping into subcultures. And so if we have, folks in the front lines of those subcultures, we'll bring them in and talk about, what's going on at the ground level. Could be connectors. So this is a great example of today's session and last session where we brought Poppy AI, basically folks that are making our lives easier and the work more interesting, and then also clients. So basically talking about bringing some clients in or people on the client side of the business to talk about some of the interesting stuff that they've been doing on their side. If you missed the first session, we brought the founders of Poppy AI and Paul, and I talked to them. They took us through how the tool works. It's a fascinating AI tool that kind of makes the UX of AI usage a lot easier, and there's privacy considerations as well. And as you see with Paul today, just is a really awesome tool for research. So that's the overview. Now let's get started. I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen here. And Paul, before you start going through your case studies, I just wanted to ask you a couple questions. Okay. So obviously you've been in the game for some time, and you were there before AI kind of came through. In your perspective, what are some of those biggest pain points, in research as a strategist that you had before this tool came along?
So I guess it's a good question because I was like an academic before I transitioned into strategy in like my mid 30s, right? Which is kind of atypical where a lot of agency staffers start as interns and then claw their way up and then get spit out in their 30s, right? I started in my 30s. I actually started as a junior because I was like so hungry for an opportunity and just like I hated marking student papers, although I'm teaching again, so I guess it's whatever. And I think for me, when I joined agency, like agency research, as we all know, is like kind of a joke a little bit if we want to look at it from not like when you hire a firm to do like real studies and things like that, but like a lot of the like desk side research or pitch research or whatever, it's kind of like the expectation is that researchers just sit at their desk all day, strategists sit at their desk, and I was a anthropologist, sociologist, qualitative research was like my bag, and the pain point for me was realizing that the reason it was the way it was is that we never have enough time to actually properly research the cultures or the industries that we're going into, and often it's just like rapid download and then do your best. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and then through that, we've all got our own approaches to sense making in a new category or in a category that you know quite well. And what I've noted over the last few years as I've kind of worked with and trained a lot of, junior strategists or mid-level strategists from other agencies is that there just is like a really solid, I think Canadian strategists are like really solid in our frameworks and our understandings of strategy and whatnot, but I always feel like we could probably add more rigor to the way we bring in new information and data, and then specifically the way we present it as well. So I saw AI as like, yeah, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent there, but that's what I saw as the main pain point is time, resources, and I think just general training on how to do uh, good good enough research.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so what you're saying is that you didn't used to go through the books behind you, to conduct your research. Like it wasn't like that old school. It was like, you're going through Google, you're going through paid sources, but you're just kind of putting all
Yeah.
that stuff into your brain and trying to make sense of it all.
Like how many times have you yourself, like myself too, it's like, oh, you found like a white paper and that's good. It's got all the research done for you. It's good enough. Let's just go, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and the problem with that is, and I've probably shared this story a few times, but it's like when you're relying on kind of white papers and trend decks, you're just also hoping that none of your, if you're, it's a competitive pitch, for example, you hope that the other agencies aren't looking at the exact same trend deck or white paper, right?
Right.
And I've been in that situation where a pitch has been derailed because like we're the last agency of the day and we're the third agency to give a very similar idea because we all found the same white paper or the same data point or whatever. And so I've always been an advocate for like, okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like we don't have to like go through, like I remember when I was doing my PhD, we did like ethics clearance took 8 months just to be able to talk to
Yeah.
people, right? We're not in that scenario, but I do think that we could probably do a better job of like using the technology that we have available to us to conduct primary research and actually uncover new or different insights.
Nice. Amazing, amazing. And then last one before we kind of get the ball rolling on your case study. What grabbed your interest in this tool, Poppy AI?
Um, okay, so as a sociologist, my guy, like the sociologist that I like the most, and that's actually helped me the most as a planner, is a strat a social philosopher, social theorist, sociologist named Bruno Latour.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys have read any Latour. It is it basically advocates for a more of a grounded theory approach where the goal is not to explain for people the cultures that they live in. The goal is to describe it as accurately as possible. The idea of like dense description, the idea of following the actors, human and non-human. Those are all things that I've kind of carried with me as a strategist. And yeah, I don't know, like it's this idea of tapping into a network of people and humans and non-humans that construct a social reality that I think is like really helpful when you're thinking about brands because a
Yeah.
brand is a network of people, human and non-human actors, right? So
Yeah.
being able to navigate and like in a way, the four C's methodology that APG advocates for, if you do that, you can do that in an actor network Latourian way just by asking the right questions and actually allowing those questions to lead you to somewhere new instead of the big critique of people like Latour is that too often researchers go in and find what they're looking for. You
Yeah.
go in with the answer you want, and then you keep going until you find that answer, and then you come back, and then we wonder why so much advertising looks muddled right now or like samey. It's like
Yeah.
when we're just relying on case studies of other campaigns and all these other things, I find that we kind of limit our thinking and our ability to kind of like even from just like a channel perspective, like just like move outside of the spheres that we're the most comfortable in and get uncomfortable by bringing in a bunch of different data sources and things like that.
Nice. Nice.
Very
Yeah,
like
I know. That's
winding
great.
answer. I'm sorry, Pedro, but
No, this is great. I mean,
open.
wouldn't expect nothing less from a sociologist, right? Because what is your PhD? You have a PhD in what again, Paul?
Sociology. I actually
Sociology,
haven't
correct?
defended yet. I've done everything up to I'm ABD. One day I will defend. I haven't defended yet. May never
Amazing.
happen. You don't need to.
It's all good.
You
Well,
don't
you're
need it.
applying it. You're applying it.
Close.
Okay, awesome. Like, let's get going. You mentioned the four C's framework for those on the call that are not aware of the four C's. That'll be the consumer, the company, the competition, and culture. Is that correct, Paul? Those are the four C's you're referring to?
Exactly.
Great.
Exactly.
So,
Um,
okay, so let's get going. What do you got?
yeah, okay. So let's look up. Okay, I decided to pick a thing that I wanted to do anyways. And that is okay, so a couple years ago, 2022, we worked with Sister Mercy. We normally work with cannabis brands, but we've we've been kind of slowly moving away from cannabis, and not moving away from it, but like adding other companies. And we had a really cool brand that we worked on called Soul Savvy. At the time, it was the pandemic, and they had this paid Slack community of sneakerheads where sneakerheads are paying $50 a month to access the Slack and basically get sneaker news and drops and buy, sell, and trade and all this stuff. And so I was working with the CMO of Soul Savvy on a project called that we ended up calling the State of Sneakers. He was the former CMO at the Lakers and left the Lakers to go do the Soul Savvy project. So I thought that was fun. And
That's very cool.
um, I love basketball, as Pedro, we had discussed previously. So um, he wanted basically, he's like, I get the sense that there's more nuance to sneaker personas than I think the company thinks there is. And so we ended up doing a real deep, um, I think we did like 40 in-depth interviews. We did this like huge ethnography of the social space, and we ended up doing a white paper called The State of Sneakers. And I had the thought that I wanted to update that because I think the sneaker world has changed a lot in the last year. So I thought this would be a fun topic because I was thinking of like going back to Soul Savvy and going like, let's do part two because now the sneaker market has crashed and what does that look like? Okay. So the way that I'm going to frame this using the Poppy tool, and honestly, I think the Poppy tool is really good for this. If I go back, this is what I wanted to say when I started talking about Latour. Apologies. What I wanted to get into was the idea that when you use just ChatGPT or whatnot, that a lot of it is what you would call what I call black box, right? Like this is a very Latour idea. This idea that what goes in something is translated inside and then comes out separately, and you're not sure exactly what happened in that black box to give a like we don't know why the answers we got, and any of us that have used ChatGPT for generative, like give me a campaign idea or help me write this brief or whatever, it spits out an answer, and the answer is not necessarily what you expect. It may be totally wrong. It may be generic. We all know if you've asked ChatGPT to give you campaign ideas on an idea for a brief as a thought starter, whatever, it always wants to give you an AR, augmented reality idea. I don't know why that is, but here it is, right? And so the thing I like about Poppy is that this is what I'm moving. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yeah, yeah, we can see it.
This box is our chat box. Instead of it just looking at its library of the entire internet and predicting the answers that you might want, Poppy does something a little different where I can collect my resources to I could do research, and then I can feed it to the chat like this. I'm connecting little arrows here. And now, and I've got three different groups, which I'll explain here in a second. Now, when I ask it questions in the chat box, instead of it just guessing what I want, it's telling me what I want based on the research that I've collected here. Okay. And so that's kind of like the first way to think about it is it's just like it's not black box, it's all out in the open. I can add and remove things as I see fit. I can size, I can reorder and whatnot. Okay. So that's the first kind of idea that I like about it. The second is a more conceptual idea that I want to share of a generalized approach that I have when I'm thinking about doing online or doing this kind of strategic research is that it goes back to what I was saying about the black box of it making decisions and guessing, and you having to go back and reprompt and reprompt and reprompt. And you remember the dawn of ChatGPT, everybody was saying, oh, the only job anyone can get now is going to be a prompt engineer, right? If you prompt engineer, that's the way to do it. And basically, what that is admitting is that it ChatGPT is kind of bad at guessing, and so by asking the right questions, we can get it to give us what we want. I've completely abandoned that personally. I think prompt engineering is a giant waste of time. And I prefer this method of saying, I don't want to have to guess at what I have to ask you to get the right thing. I only want you to answer based on what I tell you the sandbox is. Don't decide for me what the sandbox is that I've got to guess at through prompt engineering. Let me build a sandbox, and then I want you to analyze that data and open up a new level. And what that does is when you get a lot of different research insights and articles and websites, and I'll go into that in a second. You basically create a world of knowledge like that looks to me like a notebook, and it's another Latourian idea is that writing is basically you filter it through 7 notebooks. You start with all of your stuff and you tighten and you tighten and you tighten. Rapid iteration is kind of similar how we write briefs. In this case, it's basically like go out and let's do our homework. Let's bring it in here. But then there's another step that I think we have to take, and that is this idea that I've been developing of like developing a taxonomy to help basically filter the stuff you put into it so it knows what to tell you. So let me just try to explain this and Pedro, like keep me honest here. If I'm saying stuff that just sounds insane, stop me and let's unpack it a little bit, okay?
So I want to pause you there then. There's one, use one term that I think is a very common in the world of sociology, but maybe not all strategists would know what it means. You mentioned a taxonomy. Can you explain
Yeah,
that a
let's
little
talk
bit
about
to
that.
the folks?
Okay. So, what I would do as a sociologist when I'm studying a community or an online community or whatever, one of the first things you have to pick up is the language that people use in that community to talk about X, Y, or Z, right? I work a lot in cannabis, right? A lot of cannabis is coded for good reasons, and the fact that it was illegal for so long. There's a lot of terms and words and phrases that people use, right? And if you just go in and say, "Oh God, I'm doing a cannabis brand and blah blah blah," what it's going to come back with is it's going to guess at, oh yeah, like weed, pot, blah blah blah. But it's like there's different dialects in cannabis, like the way they talk about certain, like the way we talk about a joint that doesn't burn properly in Canada, as we say it canoes. There's a little canoe there, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
in California they call it tearing. Like it's different words to say the same thing. So the first thing I do now is I will, if I'm studying something new, so let's talk about sneakers. The first thing I want to do is build a taxonomy around sneaker language. I want to actually do that. And what I want to kind of understand exactly when people are talking about sneakers or weed or any topic. I want to know every detail of how consumers are analyzing that product, right? What are the terms? What are the things that matter to them? So, for example, in cannabis, I've identified 37 points of interest that are common in every cannabis review. And that's how I built my taxonomy. So, does it have white ash or black ash? Is it aromatic or does it have a hay smell? Like there's all of these terms, right? And I build my taxonomy, and then when I filter social conversations into when I basically I'll go out and I'll download a whole bunch of Reddit reviews and comments and YouTube threads and anything I can get UGC social data. If I've trained my AI on a taxonomy to capture certain words that I'm interested in understanding, instead of it guessing what it wants me to do with that information and thereby data mining, where you just like, let me throw in a bunch of conversations and see what comes out, right? I'm sensitizing the AI model to group ideas. So it's kind of like if you're doing any kind of like audience analysis, it's like the same idea of like clustering, right? I want to cluster all of the social conversations in cannabis around moisture content. I want to cluster all the conversations around, uh, you know, bud size and like big buds are more desirable than small buds, things like that, right?
Right.
And then it basically, like, if you think about it as like a spaghetti strainer, it just basically keeps all the good stuff. It allows you to play with that good stuff and ask it questions based on just the good stuff. And it throws out all the stuff that I don't care about as a strategist because it doesn't have any bearing on my work. So a taxonomy is just a language-based structure that helps me identify what matters and what counts in that community or for the brief I'm trying to write. Does that kind of make sense?
That makes sense.
So
Like it kind of sounds like a classification system that bring things in and you make sense of something that, without the system, you would have been kind of all over the place to kind of bring it into, a
exactly.
cohesive, understandable language, I guess
So
you could
let's
call
build in real time a sneaker taxonomy. Okay.
it. Yeah.
And the first
I
thing
love
I
sneakers,
do,
by the way. I'm wearing Nikes right now, so
there you go.
this is up my alley. Let's go.
And by all means, guys, like if you have questions or like stop me, just go off mute and stop me because I think this has changed the way that I do my work because it allows me to get so much better data, right? So many more ideas. So what I've got is I always start with a taxonomy I've already built, and I basically say like something to the degree of I actually pre instead of just doing this live, I've actually asked myself questions here. Hold on a second.
And by the way, when I was reading that report about the sneakerheads, I was
Yep,
surprised that 36% of people own more than 75 sneakers.
that's within that super heavy group. So they're like the heads. Yeah, you should see my
That's
basement. It's disgusting.
unbelievable.
So I've asked it as like, here's my taxonomy for how consumers are evaluating cannabis flowers. What do you see here? How do you understand this framework and how I got to these markers? How would you describe this qualitative analytics approach? Is I'm just kind of like, okay, so yeah, you've broken your taxonomy into format markers, type markers, pre-packaging, and experience markers. That's true. And I've got a bunch of sub markers there, like composition of cannabis, strain, genetics, major minor cannabinoids, terpenes, yada yada yada, right? You got all of this stuff here, okay? And then we go, okay, great. So now I want to identify categories of markers and use the same approach, but for sneakerheads as they are evaluating sneakers that they want to buy, own, or want to sell. Can you do that from the information provided? So what I've done here in this box, and I'm going to disconnect this. In this box, what I've got here are it's like I found a white paper, I found sneakerhead jargon, I found I've got some text here, and because I've grouped them, I only have to group this one box, which is a new feature that I really love. And so now it's saying, okay, yeah, you want to build a taxonomy the way we did for cannabis, but we don't have a taxonomy for sneakers, which I don't. I'm actually doing this live in the moment now. So I'm basically saying I want to do a similar approach in sneakers based on all of this data that I've given you about sneakerheads right now. Okay. And
Mhm.
so I go, okay, certainly. So categories of markers for sneaker evaluation, aesthetic and design markers, colorway, cultural and historical significance markers, performance and comfort markers, rarity and exclusivity markers. Like a big thing in sneaker culture is the rarer the sneaker, the more value it has. And there's a whole like what I loved writing that State of Sneakerheads report is at the height of the pandemic, the way people were like using bots and anything that could give them a competitive advantage of copying a rare pair of like Travis Scott Jordan 1 lows or something like that. Like a sneaker that you buy at the time for $150 and tomorrow it's going to be worth 600 or 1,000
Yeah. I
hundred,
was
right?
surprised when I started getting into sneakers. I was like, oh, I want to get a Jordan, a pair of Jordan 1s, the originals. You can't. Like,
You
it
can't.
is so
Yeah, you got to
rare.
go to the
And
resale market and it's brutal. And this is
yeah.
all like based on data from the last couple of years. But like that's okay, so that's fine. So now we've got ourselves very quickly, like you saw how quickly we did this. We did this in literally 5 minutes, right, guys? Like it's like we've gotten okay. So yeah, I know how to make a type a taxonomy. I get it. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. I could have easily put in YouTube things on how to build a taxonomy. Like there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat here, right? And then I've trained it on the some language that I found, and in a lot of subcultures and other things like that, you will find that people have written glossaries. Any resource that you can find where people are talking about the language of that subculture, that's helpful data because now we've got all of this stuff. So now, if I go back to the task at hand, which is I actually am thinking that I want to update and do a State of Sneakers 2024, it's 2 years later, right? How have sneakers changed? So what I've done here in this box, I will do this. How can
Can
I
you
fit?
zoom in into one of these boxes just to show what you have in there a little bit?
Yeah, so okay, so here's what I've done. So because I already kind of like got this ready, so I kind of went through and took I did a copy and paste of an earlier version of this of this taxonomy. So I've got this here. This is a text box. What I've got here is three different YouTube videos on YouTubers that are talking about the current state of sneakers, right? Because the idea that I have, and I'm just doing this as like a tester, if I'm doing this for myself, I'm probably collecting a hell of a lot more than three. But I just want to kind of show how easy this can be to kind of like give ourselves some kind of framework to start working with and to playing with, right? And then what I've got here, and it's kind of hard to see, because I can't really zoom. Can I zoom in here? Yeah, there we go. So, Sneakerhead Conversation 2024. So what I did, let me actually just stop sharing my screen and give you a quick look at how easy it is to collect and scrape consumer data. Okay, because there's people are on the internet all the time. They're talking constantly, and it's a good idea to listen sometimes. So we're gonna go drive. I'm gonna share my screen in a second. Um, I'm gonna give you trying to find this.
Because one of the beauties of this tool is you can record conversations and you upload those conversations straight
That's right.
into Poppy, right?
Yeah, so right now you'll see my Fireflies note taker here. One thing I will do after this, actually, for real, is I will download this AI transcript of this conversation and I will upload this into the same Poppy window to add more structure even more.
There you go.
Like
Yeah.
AI
And
note
for
takers are perfect for a lot of reasons. Okay, so
yeah.
uh,
And for the
I'm just
folks without an AI note taker for this and you want to use this information, all you have to do is basically grab the YouTube video that's going to be uploaded afterwards and upload it into your Poppy, right? So
totally. You guys
works
can
that
see
way
the
too.
spreadsheet here, hey?
Yeah.
And really this is just unsorted. And basically what I've done is I have taken so all of the YouTube videos that you saw up there, I go back to a thing I used to tell sociologists that I was training back like a decade ago, was that there was so much social happening in YouTube comments. Each one of these videos has over two or 300 comments that are like, yeah, I feel you, bro. This is blah, blah, blah. And I just basically like copied and pasted it into this spreadsheet. I've got like a lot of stuff that is like sort by, it's like just bonk, like, it doesn't matter. But this is the thing, right? It's because I've given it a taxonomy, you can have crap here, like all these thanks comments. Like I could probably delete those. Like the amount of data cleaning you have to do now, like AI kind of does that for you because the taxonomy is like ignore anything like that. These are IKEA lac shelves as a comment on something, and I've also sorted it by by whatever. But let me go just
So
quickly
you
show.
just copied the all the comments from a YouTube
I
video and
just threw
you
them in there.
posted
Yeah.
and you uploaded them in there? Nice.
Sneakers, Canada. Let's go our sneakers. I'm just gonna grab I'm just gonna find a thread. You can't see what I'm doing, but I'm going on Reddit.
Yeah,
Uh,
we can see it.
you can see Reddit right now?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. I really don't want to see a slide the sneaker make a comeback. Okay. It's maybe not the best one. Uh, is anybody generally depressed? This was 3 years ago, but I'm just kind of giving you an idea. This is kind of how I would do it. I would go, "Rump." literally like this. And
Otherwise,
I would go into this and I would just paste it. And I would just data sort by column A. And then I go data cleanup, remove duplicates. I got rid of 9 duplicate rows. And then there's just like a few things here, right?
yeah.
So what I've done here is just like really I've got just like some structured things like YouTube comments. I could find articles, all of that stuff. But I also like to have a lot of UGC stuff in here as well. So if I click on this, can you see Poppy again?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what this document is here is just that it's just this. Um, it's just my just quick back of the envelope. Let's just get as much as we can in here. And now I want to ask it some questions. So, based on the spreadsheet and other videos, what are the emergent themes from the conversations around sneakers compared to the taxonomy? Can you start with a raw count of every marker that shows up in social data and showcase it in a frequency chart based on the data? Okay, let's actually do this in 2 steps. So I'm like, let's make a frequency chart. I will tell you that GPT-4 and not Claude if you're using Poppy. And I will go like this. And so it's thinking. So it's based on this, all of this data that I provided it here. And this is just like an initial pull. It's given me just like, okay, like what are the most mentioned markers here? What does the community actually care about? Um, Social media influence, the most frequently mentioned marker. It's just like the idea, I think, that I'm trying to communicate here with everyone is that this doesn't solve your problems for you. This isn't us using ChatGPT or Claude or whatever to do our work for us. What this is using these tools as a way to deepen our understanding across more touch points. Think about yourself and how long even getting to this point as a strategist would have taken you 2 years ago. I would have had to spend a day on Google, finding my resources, reading everything, kind of like thematically coding it, right? And it doesn't do that. So, and then I can also instead here, like I can go back and ask another system. Let's ask Claude the same question, right? And it's like does a similar job.
What I like about this, Paul, is that I think nowadays we don't have a problem with, a shortage of information. We have a problem of making sense of information. What this does is kind of, you know, is making sense of this entire database that you're feeding into it.
Exactly, exactly. And then it's like if I'm updating this and I kind of want to know, like, can you give me an insight into the key ideas and insights around each market and how they're shaping the sneaker market in 2024? Now I've got a database here. I've got all of my information here, and I can start using ChatGPT now in a different way. I can start asking it smart questions, right? I'll go back to like my 4Cs, right? Like, how do customers perceive, let's say I'm working on ASICs, okay? This is like we're wanting to do this. Like how do customers perceive ASICs compared to other competitors? Now I've just given it so much more data to pull from, and I can go through and ask my 3Cs style questions here to like get deeper and more original insights. And I'm not relying on I got to find the right white paper because I'm actually generating it myself, right? Like, who are the direct and indirect competitors in the market, right? It's like, okay. Okay, so it gives me a list of the brands that have been mentioned, and here's how they're compete. Let's see, let's go here. Here's how they're being. This is what they're competing on, and that it just allows us to go deeper. And then, like my favorite thing is just telling it to elaborate. Please elaborate on
One of the
all.
things that surprised me the most when I was in the States last time is the shoes that people are wearing, like the young people in the cities, were wearing. It's no longer just Nikes and Adidas. I'm seeing a lot of Hokas, I'm seeing a lot of On Clouds and stuff like
Big
that.
time. Big
It
time.
is the sneaker culture changing towards this like lifestyle, athletic looking feel that I wouldn't have known unless I had gone down there and seen it because I don't see that often, that at least here in Alberta.
Exactly. And you kind of like get like a real sense of like the culture here to start with. Because if I go like New Balance, this is all based on, here's like 5 or 6 insights from the community basically at this point.
Yeah.
It's like strong momentum and lifestyle, high quality materials, successful collabs, growing cultural relevance, premium pricing, made in USA. So on and on and on, right? So I guess that's kind of like really how deep it gets, right? It's just a system that shares a couple just key ideas to kind of like flip your brain on how to use this stuff to generate new ideas. It is we don't rely on generative AI to do our homework for us because the homework is bad and generic. Two, we do enough work to understand the language of a subculture or a consumer category and understand exactly what counts. Three, we build a taxonomy that allows you to when you can allows you to put social comments and UGC and other thing, YouTube comments and TikToks and everything else that we can do here through a filter that collects in data around the things that we actually care about. And then at the end of that, we've got a workspace here that I can go back to and build on as I'm working on a project, adding more data, clarifying things, and it allows you now to have a set trained environment where the likelihood of me getting a one shot answer, meaning an answer, I ask it a question that gives me the answer I want right away instead of having to get me to, uh, instead of having to get me to, prompt engineer it to death.
Yep.
Instead, it's more likely now, based on the fact that I've trained it in the network and the style that I want it, I'm more likely to get original insights very quickly.
So what I'm finding really interesting about this method, Paul, is that you were very intentional with what you wanted the AI to do. So you went ahead, you did your own, you did your research from the sources that you felt were, you know, scored higher in terms of credibility, let's say.
Totally.
You took that information, you put it into Poppy, into those boxes, and then you were asking questions, like they're almost like hypotheses, like because
Yeah,
you do mention like you're using a hypothesis, like a hypothesis driven approach, right, to come up with this taxonomy that you have here on the right hand side.
exactly. Yeah, so I'm not guessing. I'm yeah, because I think too much of our work as strategists lately, at least the way that I've experienced it, is a lot of data mining. Like we have all this data surrounding us, and we go in and we go in and we kind of like try to like collect little artifacts and come back and oh look at the artifacts I have. And there's no like methodology behind that. And I was trained very early on by the statistical a stats prof I had in my PhD class that was basically like if you're data mining, you're in the wrong business. You're not gonna find anything through data mining. The idea is you have a question and you have a purposeful need to answer that question using the tools.
I think that's the first lesson because I was an analyst for a while, and I think that was the first lesson I learned is don't go into a data set, waiting for the data set to give you the answers and speak back to you. You have to go with some sort of hypothesis, so you don't get lost in the soup, right? It's very easy to get lost in the whole, the
That's
sheer
right.
quantity of data that you have,
That's
and
right.
not all data is created equal, right? So, for example, you're pulling data from Reddit, which you could say that it has already a certain profile of people that use it, right? If you
Sure.
pull data
Yeah.
from X, right? X or Twitter, which has a completely different profile than people that use, Reddit. And so this way you're not kind of keeping yourself in a bubble, necessarily. Right.
I think it's a really good point because so much of like I use Reddit a lot in my work. I think it's because in cannabis, I see a couple cannabis people in the room here, so I think you guys can probably relate that cannabis and Reddit, because of the restrictions, like working on one of the biggest cannabis brands in Canada today got their IG shut down just randomly. And we're like, okay, well, how the hell am I supposed to, what are we supposed to do now, right?
Yeah.
It's like Reddit and cannabis have like a very positive relationship. And so people will say to me sometimes, it's like, well, how do you could trust the Reddit data? And I'm like, have you been in a focus group? Like, it's not any different. You got five people who agreed to come to a weird building in an industrial park for $50. Like, I don't know, like it's every research methodology that we have comes with its own bias and it comes with its own limitations. And as long as we're aware of that, at least with this process, I can get to mixed methodology because I can add survey data in here as much as I can add raw consumer data. And it works the same. And so we can start to kind of like build these blocks and put these ideas together in a different way. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, absolutely. Because I feel that, what we're doing here is almost like a qualitative analysis because we're going deep on something and then
Yeah.
we can take that information and then test it out on a quantitative, representative sample instrument if we want.
Yeah, it's like
Um,
the idea of that I'm personally starting to kind of like think more about this conversation in terms of like qualitative analytics,
right.
right? So it's like we've only been able to rely on in advertising and marketing on quantitative analytics because those are easy to come by, right? Why do you think so many people do programmatic advertising when it's such an inefficient channel? And it's
Yeah.
because, oh, yeah, I can actually show you a number that says I do X and Y happens, where I can't do that in a lot of other things. So that gets buttressed up because there's a measurement thing as I can see a relationship here, so therefore that must be better. And as a result, we have ignored all of these other kind of qualitative things because qualitative research traditionally has been time consuming and expensive.
Yes.
And now it's not, right? Like that's like what I
Yeah.
just showed you in 10 minutes is like before to get that same level of qual insight on a program, like that's a month worth of work and 60K minimum spend, right? And then you're looking at if you I'm exaggerating a little bit. There's still a room for that, but like this is a kind of a way to kind of like speed track your ability to kind of incorporate original data.
Yeah.
No
But
money.
I think, but Paul, I think I totally agree because I feel that the developments in AI, with all the oxygen in the room has been taken by, oh no, we can basically now do things faster, more efficiently, and things like that. But what we're seeing is, I think that the AI revolution in our field at least has an undercurrent in research that is not being talked about enough. I've seen folks like the evidence of folks, that are doing synthetic data qualitative focus groups. So basically, they're able
Yeah,
to build, a persona, a digital twin, right? It was what they call it, of a CEO, and you're able to talk to that CEO, via
exactly.
chat.
You're basically one step removed in this methodology from basically creating a chat, like within a few more prompts of adding a bit more consumer data on sneakerheads, I could say you're a sneakerhead and I'm going to ask you questions based on all this data. So you basically have like an interview subject that is trained on thousands of conversations that have taken place over the last year or however long you go back. It's the same approach, right? What they're doing, like that's where what's interesting about Poppy. And I was talking to a person I'm trying to kind of like build a qualitative analytic tool based on like there's some things I like about Poppy, but I think there's other things that we could improve on. And basically the name of the game of like Poppy is just like a ChatGPT skin.
Yep.
Like it's so easy for anybody here to learn how to do this stuff. So it's
Yeah.
like, which is scary too, right? It just makes it, if anybody can do it, then it's like, we see in music what's happened when anybody can just make a song. It's like, okay, anybody who's not a, you know, Miley Cyrus or like that top of the echelon, you just don't exist. So, anyways,
Yeah, exactly. And so before we kind of start closing here, Paul, I'd like to ask you one more question. So what do you see being some of the limitations with a tool like this, to do research for, could be marketing in general or just advertising? What are some of the limitations with Poppy, you think?
I think there's two that I've noted already. Is the one is that I am kind of glossing over how it's pulling out my data in what order because I don't really know. And I don't think anybody really knows. You know what I mean? Like there is definitely a world where the answers you get back, like you gotta that's why the three things that I do instead of prompt engineering is one, I ask the same question to different chats, and that's why I like Poppies. I can switch between Claude and ChatGPT in the same window. It's a good idea to get a second opinion.
Yep.
Some days ChatGPT seems to have like a bad. I don't know if you guys have noticed, like ChatGPT will have a bad day and everything. It just gives you crap sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You have
Yeah.
to really pull
Sometimes
it
they wake
out,
up. Yeah.
right? Uh, so that's still kind of problematic that it will give you different answers. So it's still not perfect, and there's still a required thought that you as a strategist have to put into it, which is what I like, because that's where the real stuff happens anyways. You've just collected the consumer data and the category data, and uh, it's not doing your homework. It's not doing the rest of it for you. It's still up to you to like build your insights and all the rest of it. It just gives you a better data source, I think. The other thing I would say that everyone should be doing in general is before you go anywhere with any of your data, uh, ChatGPT is kind of bad at hallucinating sometimes, but it's a really good critic. So everything I do now gets run through. I've actually built a GPT in ChatGPT, um, where I've basically trained it to be an asshole to me. And it's like, I don't want you to be nice. Give it to me straight. What's wrong with this document? And be like, okay, if you want to hear it, and it was like, this is generic, this is poorly thought out, this is a tenuous connection, and it's like, okay, great. That's where you start to like get better as a strategist, is you now have, Canadians we're definitely if we don't like something, we're not going to tell you, we're just not going to engage. So if you've ever had a strategy boss that you're like, can I get feedback? And they're like, oh yeah, maybe next week, right? It's
Yeah.
like you can really sharpen yourself as a strategist with these tools just by getting brutal, unfiltered feedback from it. And it's not always right, but it does make you think about connections and stuff a little bit different. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. This GPT that you created, is it a private GPT or can people find it on the public GPT store?
Maybe I'll share with the APG Slack just so
Yeah,
I can because I've trained it with um some different documents on like best
right.
practices and stuff like that. So it's like it's again the building your own GPT can work in the same way as Poppy, but again, the reason why I prefer Poppy is that the when you build your own GPT, all that stuff is black box and you're not really sure exactly what's going on in there. And I don't like that. I like to have more control, right?
Yeah, yeah. Privacy is super important, and I think that's one of the things that really I found interesting with Poppy is that what's in there, it's in there. It's not
Yeah,
being kind of
it's
used to
basically
train.
on your local. It's not being uploaded anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Well, right on, Paul. Is there anything else, that you want to share about how you're using Poppy before we start closing here? I mean, it was pretty
I
cool the
mean,
example with sneakers, but what else?
look, like I've had Poppy for a month, like September 11th, and I just keep experimenting. Every day, I think that what I would recommend for people is to like look at the tools that are available to you and like go off the beaten path a little bit, right? Because in this case, like this taxonomy thing is total accident. Like it's like I've noticed when I train it on a taxonomy how much better it performs. And that's just a new learning that I want to share with people because like I want us to have a thriving industry, and I want everybody to be better strategists. I think this is the kind of way you can supercharge yourself a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And one last question there is, how would you then use, for example, this taxonomy you created? What are some examples of how you would use something like that in your work?
Yeah, yeah, like then it goes like I will do like I do like 3, 4 Cs decks all the time. So I'm using that as my starting point, right? Of like, okay, I've built out my 4 Cs now. I've built my slides out. Now it's up to me to find supporting data and other things like that. So it's basically becomes my starting framework that
Yeah.
I then have to then conceptualize and orient towards the brief at hand or the project at hand.
Hmm.
But what I found is that it gives me a higher baseline, right?
Yeah.
Not starting
No,
from like
fair.
I got to do a month's worth of research. None of us have those timelines anymore. You could do this in
Yeah.
one day and set yourself up, and you're like, for the rest of the week, now I can focus on the brief, or I can focus on the deck, or whatever, instead of focusing on, do I have all the information I need, and is this enough information? Like that idea of like strategists as anxious overachievers, because there's no way to know when you've collected enough data. So you keep going and going. When you deliver, it's like people are like, whoa, you way overshot. That's because of our knowledge anxiety that we have as a field, and the likelihood of a lot of strategists to overshoot. And I think that this helps that a little bit. It allows you
Yeah.
to rein in the demons of, do I have enough information before I can start doing the thinking? You can put the information around to start actually developing an insight, start actually developing, spending more time on an idea. And that to me is liberating. That's the whole point of
Huge.
this tech, ideally. So,
Yeah. What I love about this, I see now kind of the research elements of strategy kind of almost taking adding a new dimension to it through AI, right? And so, of course, historically, whenever you get a project, of course, you're going to start off secondary research on Google, spend a couple of days there, but then it's like, okay, well, let's do some ethnography, let's do some loyalist research and things like that,
exactly.
and that's
Exactly.
where I see now Poppy AI can play a role, and particularly in the loyalist research, pulling data from folks from communities, and now you can actually understand, what are some of those important associations that we need to position our brand around, things like that. It is tremendous.
A little trick I do sometimes is I have like probably like 30 Reddit burners, and I'll do a post and I'll be like,
Right.
hey, community X, what do you think about ABC? And then people will start talking, and then I'll use uh other of my Reddit personas to like keep, oh, what did you mean by that? Things like that.
Yeah.
Then and then throw that into the AI, right? And all of a sudden you've got a different way to look at it. So
Yeah. And one thing about the Reddit, how long do you typically give yourself to kind of let that conversation unfold? Do you start like a month in advance, or can you have a Reddit conversation and let it
no, a
unfold
Reddit
15
thread
days?
it's like any content. It has like a 24-hour half-life.
Okay. Yeah.
So
So
you usually, if you start a Reddit, if you ping a community to answer a benign question you want to know, give it a day and you have like, if it
done.
goes anywhere, and then often there's subreddits that are like like have fractured from the main subreddit. So there's always these little side subreddits that are in the same category or topic. And so you can just ask all of them. You
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
24
Oh,
hours later, you've
amazing.
got some new qual data.
Yeah. Oh, right on. Well, Paul, thank you so much. Before we go, I would just like to share a couple of things here with the group. There is, of course, the AI battle coming up. It is sold out, so if you
That's
haven't been
awesome.
able to get your tickets, reach out to Michelle and see, or don't reach out to Michelle. So this is gonna be super fun. November 13th, between 5 and 8 p.m. We're gonna see humans going against machines on a nice little briefing showdown. So, and then as we kind of come out with more, episodes of this Grow Your Brain, we're going to be sharing on the APG LinkedIn as well, and our website. So if you have any questions, reach out to us there.